Time for some operators. In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at the various Swift operators. And an operator is a special symbol or phrase that we use to check, change, or combine values. An example is using the addition operator, which adds two numbers together. Let's take a look at the terminology here. An operator will either be unary, binary, or ternary. And as you can see from the spelling of the three Swift operator types, you can figure out what they're for. Una meaning one, so this operator works on a single target. Like this, for example, this unary operator is being used immediately before the var a, so it's a prefix operator. And here it changes the var's value from positive 10 to negative 10. Or we can use the not operator, as we're doing here before this constant b, to flip its value from true to false. So those are two examples of the unary prefix operators. And a unary postfix operator appears right after the constant or variable. An example of that would be force unwrapping an optional. And we'll get into all the details of optionals in another lecture, but I just want to example it here. So if I have a declared optional, you would use a unary postfix operator like this, and that's force unwrapping again. So for example, I would just write out some optional and put the exclamation mark to force unwrap it, which will give us an error because there's nothing in that string right now. So if I go ahead and set the optional to something, then the force unwrapping works just fine. So that's an example of a unary postfix operator. And again, don't worry about optionals, we'll get into that in another lecture. And I know that operator looks like the not operator, but when it's used as a postfix like it is here, it's called force unwrapping. And it's doing something completely different. It's force unwrapping an optional value. So when you use it before the target, then it's called the not operator, and that's a prefix operator. And interestingly enough, that Swift doesn't allow postfix operators for the plus or the minus. You can see that'll bring up two errors. These are not postfix operators. Let's take a look at binary operators. And a binary operator operates on two targets. And the by part of its name gives that away, by meaning two. So these operators appear between their two targets, and the values that the operator affects are called operands. In this example, that's the number 3 and 6. So there'll always be two operands with the binary operator, one on each side of it. So these are pretty simple to understand. Let's keep going and take a look at the ternary operator. The ternary conditional operator is a special operator with three parts, ter meaning three. And it's written in this way. So the ternary operator will operate on three targets, again, ter meaning three, and like C, Swift only has one ternary operator, the ternary conditional operator. So this checks something to see if it's true or false, and depending on that value, it will run the appropriate code. So that's the general format, something to check, and then two possible answers that will run, depending on whether question is true or false. So you read this like this. If the condition on the left here we're calling question, if that's true, then go ahead and use answer 1. If it's false, then use answer 2. So you're going to use the ternary operator on a Boolean. I'll go ahead and put an example down. Here I declared a variable called isRaining, and I gave it a value of true. And then I declared two string variables. And then we used the question mark syntax and a colon. And since isRaining is set to true, the value of the variable on the left of the colon that gets run. So if I set this to false, then the value on the right of the colon will be run. So this operator, the ternary operator, is a shortcut for evaluating a true or false statement. And it's equivalent to an if-else statement, but it's done so on one line of code. So if I were to write this same statement out using the if-else code, it would look like this. And that's identical to what we did with the ternary, only the if-else takes more code to do it. And something to note, you want to use the ternary conditional operator with care, though, because its conciseness can lead to hard-to-read code if it's overused. Okay, let's move on to the assignment operator. The assignment operator assigns or places a value from whatever's on the right side of it to what's on the left side. And in this example, the assignment operator updates the value of D with the value of E. And now D has a value of 6. And if the right side of the assignment is a tuple, its individual elements can be assigned into multiple constants or variables. And we'll see how tuples work in another lecture, but they're simple enough to understand. They're objects that can hold multiple values. Go ahead and example this. Here I'm assigning the tuple on the right, which contains two values, to the constants x and y on the left. And again, we'll get into tuples in another lecture. But this just basically demonstrates that when you use the assignment operator, you can assign the values of the right side of it to whatever's on the left. In this case, I'm holding multiple values with a tuple. Let's keep moving and take a look at arithmetic operators. Swift has the 4 standard arithmetic operators: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And you can also use the addition operator to add 2 strings together, and that's called concatenation. And these 2 separate strings have been added to make one longer string. So these operators are pretty easy so far. Let's take a look at the remainder operator. The remainder operator returns the remainder of a division, and it's written out like this with the % sign in the middle. That's your remainder operator. So it first does the division. It's dividing 9 by 4, and it doesn't care about what the calculation of that division returns. All it wants is the remainder of that division. In this case, the remainder of 9 divided by 4 is 1. And this will work with negative numbers as well. That will bring back -1. But it'll only work like that if the dividend is the negative number. We have the -9, that's the dividend here. So the result is remainder -1. If we make the divisor the negative number, then the negative sign is simply ignored, and we can see the result is going to be a positive, a 1. Okay, up next, the unary minus operator. The unary minus operator lets us change the sign of a numeric value by using the minus operator as a prefix before the variable or constant. Here I declared a constant with a value of 2, and then by prefixing the constant, it flips the sign around to its opposite sign, so we can see the output here is -2. And now the -2 constant has a value of -2, now gets prefixed again with the unary minus operator. It changes the sign of that to +2. So it's flipping the bit, as they say, changing the sign around. Let's take a look at the unary plus operator. This operator doesn't actually do anything. It simply returns the value it operates on without changing anything. And you can see there's no change to the sign. So then what's the purpose of it? Well, it's mostly used to provide symmetry in your code for positive numbers when you're also working with the unary minus operator for negative numbers. So it's simply an operator to make your code more readable if you're using the unary minus operator a lot, just providing symmetry. Moving on to compound assignment operators. These are very commonly used, and they're a shorthand way for adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing to a variable. And it's called a compound assignment operator because it's combining 2 operators to create shorthand notation. So here's an example of combining 2 operators, the addition operator and the assignment operator together. And this is read as G equals G plus 2. Here's the equivalent of writing this out with normal notation. So the plus with the equal sign is called the addition assignment operator, and that's a shorthand way of adding a value to a variable. We can also use all of the arithmetic operators coupled with the assignment operator, making a shorthand notation too. And what this is saying is G equals G minus 1, G equals G times 3, and G equals G divided by 2. Very common operators, and you're going to use this notation quite a bit when coding in Swift.